Welcome, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us live or on the recording of episode 11 of Dr. Jeff Talks About Sex and Intimacy, Nurturing Love and Intimacy, Strengthening Your Relationship. I am humbled and so honored that you have taken the time out of your busy life to join us and learn more about this topic. Don't forget, we are on your favorite social media. Facebook, YouTube, X, whatever that is. They're looking for followers so we can stream. We have enough people who do that. What will happen is we will stream live rather than just the recording. So we thank you if you are a follower or willing to follow us on Facebook. Go to the website. If you want to see previous episodes, there's so many great episodes out there already, and there's wonderful ones coming up with amazing, articulate, phenomenal guests. You can see on the calendar who's coming up next, what's happening, everything that's going on. Don't forget, you can listen to us in your car now, on Spotify, on iRadio, whatever you like, iHeart, whatever your particular thing is you want to listen to podcasts on, we are there with you. So please do that as well. Please know this, that you are completely welcome. Whatever your sexual orientation, whatever your gender identity or your relationship style, this is a space where you are so welcome, and I hope you learn from all of our wonderful guests. So you are most welcome here. Now, the goal of the podcast, it's really simple. The goal of this podcast is simply to empower and enlighten you with the evidence-based information, accurate information you need to improve your sexual health and to deepen your loving relationships. Who doesn't want more of that? I certainly do. I know after 39 years, it's a wonderful thing to have loving it this evening. And so I am out here in California. I came to the Sacramento area to be a part of the Urologics conference out here, and I did that on Saturday and Sunday, and I am still out here, and I went to this amazing place. And if we have my PowerPoint there, Vic, I have two pictures to share. This is Colonel Armstrong tree. This tree is 1,400 years old. What a humbling, miraculous thing to be in the presence. This is where I was today, and I wanted to share it with you because trees have wonderful lessons to teach us, and these trees are all connected intricately by their deep roots. If you've ever read, there's a wonderful book out there called Finding the Mother Tree, and they found that trees communicate and are intricately and deeply connected to each other, just like you and I are intricately and deeply connected to each other. So if you see how huge this tree is, let me see if I can get to the next slide. This is the root of another tree. So you can kind of get an idea of how massive these miraculous, beautiful, aged, wonderful trees, and they are rooted and connected together, just like you and I are rooted and connected together. So that's my pictures I wanted to share. But going back to our topic this evening, what I would like to do is right now, if you have that special somebody in your life, cuddle up with them and listen to this episode together. If you don't, get that picture in your mind and heart of that person that you love, because relationships are one of the greatest sources of love, connection, and joy. But guess what, people? They don't flourish on their own. They require care, attention, and intention to truly thrive. In the midst of our busy, crazy schedules and daily stress and life's inevitable challenges, intimacy can easily take a back seat. But keeping love alive isn't about grand gestures always. It's really about the small, everyday moments that build trust, that deepen understanding and strengthen your bond with your loved one. It's the way you...
Well, we've lost Jeff temporarily. Hopefully we'll get him back on soon as his internet clears up. But I'm going to bring in Dr. Christian Jordal here so that we can keep going along with the show here. All righty, let me just see here. All right, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Vic. I really appreciate it. And I know Dr. Jeff will be back any moment, but it's great to be here.
Yeah, there's sometimes when you're trying to do these remotes, you always have to deal with what the internet's like.
Absolutely.
I don't have your introduction in front of me, so I'm going to let you do your own introduction if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Christian Jordal. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sex therapist and supervisor. I've been in practice for about 16 years here in the Philadelphia area. I'm also on faculty at a local university. So I'm really I feel very grateful and I'm looking forward to talking to you all about relationships. That is what I do. I work extensively with individuals who are looking for relationships, in relationships, thinking about getting out of relationships. And specifically, hopefully tonight I can give you some things that'll help you as you continue to, going back to that sort of analogy, the tree, that was about mindfulness. That was about tuning in. And as you're sitting there on the couch with your partners, I would encourage you to do that. Tune in to what is it about your relationship that you really value? How does the other person know that? And then at the same time, perhaps from this, you'll get some things you can work on as you move forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure when exactly I cut out, but technology is wonderful. Once in a while it goes bad, but thank you for moving forward. And I'm so glad that you're here this evening. So I look forward to your presentation.
Thanks again, Dr. Jeff. And so my presentation tonight is what are the challenges and strategies that, when you think about your relationship, my relationship, what are the challenges we all face in deepening the love and the intimacy in our relationships, in fostering that stronger connection, that lasting connection with our partners? And what are some strategies, hopefully at the end of the night, you can take from our conversation, notably after the presentation? So when I think about my experience and you look at research, and ask yourself your own relationship, people who've had long-term relationships. Generally, they feel loved, and they feel loved because they feel appreciated and a sense of kindness, from their partner. There is physical affection, there's laughter between the persons involved. They sort of try to really work to cultivate time together, even as there's lots of pressures around that. I think that they tend to try to tune in to their partners, to listen, and I think they have a sense of when it's really important to do that. And they also are emotionally vulnerable and open. And what I mean by that there is it's not just about being vulnerable about, sort of the sadness, hurt, disappointment. It's also about risking what it is that you're looking for or I'm looking for in a relationship, and how specifically we put ourselves out there in our relationships and sort of hopefully are received in that or heard in that. I also think that there's acts of service, there's acts of consideration that we do for our partners. And I think that there is an underlying respect to those acts. And I think that also it's not about the absence of conflict. It's about being disciplined with each other to address conflict consistently. So when you think about the challenges that people in relationships face, I think that there are myriad ones, especially when you look at sort of both individuals, couples in therapy, as well as the research. Frequently, there are issues of communication, challenges around communication. That gets into this idea of struggles with listening. There are challenges with trust. There can be a lot of jealousy. I also think that relationships don't exist in a vacuum. They're not static. They change over time. People's lives change. And so individuals' goals and values can change for a variety of reasons, and that can impact sort of and challenge people in relationship. I think clearly as we all age, as we all navigate health issues with getting older, the idea of sex and intimacy certainly is something that changes over the course of relationships, and that can be a significant challenge. I think that finances, it's not just something in the literature. This came for me recently when I'm thinking about what's going on here in the United States socially. I think that for a lot of people, they're really struggling financially, and that's creating a lot of difficulties for couples and people in relationship. I think that obviously, as I said, balancing time, prioritizing things, whether it be work, kids, relationship, it can be a tall order. And especially when you navigate parenting, kids getting older, there can be differences in how to approach that. And there can also be extended family kinds of dynamics that really can impede and make things difficult and stressful for couples. And I also think there are life transitions that also impact and can make things challenging for couples as well. So, and I'm going to break these down as we go through tonight. So hopefully I'll give you some ideas for how it is that you can navigate these challenges. So when I think about the challenge of communication, in a benign way, it could be misunderstandings, but it also can be avoidance. It can be not expressing how you're feeling or what you're thinking clearly. And it can be avoidance of those difficult conversations. And I think what I would say to you is, as you think about that idea, we all have avoided some discussion with a loved one, with a partner at some point in our lives. I think that what you have to tune into is when you sort of get that gut feeling that basically this is important or we need to talk about this. And I would encourage you to try to find a time when it's just the two of you, the people in the relationship, and specifically trying to sort of slowly talk about the issue, recognizing that it could be a hot button issue, and trying to be really deliberate and mindful about how you do that. One of the things that I felt like was contextually, something to consider here is anyone who's a therapist will see this all the time. Families differ in the what can be said, in the tone, literally the volume of what can be said, what's talked about, how to resolve conflict. We all individually and collectively learn that directly and indirectly through our families. And when we get into significant relationships, love relationships, we get this. There's not a manual. We don't really think about that. But what we have to do as a challenge is navigate differences in what is talked about and how you talk about things. Now, when you think about sort of what does the research support helps when you're challenged with communication, again, sort of active listening, and reflection. So what that means is, if you're seeing a therapist, but you can practice this at home, it's like, okay, what did you hear your partner say? Reflecting back to each other what it is you heard them say. That is an interesting exercise because frequently we interpret what our partners are saying through our own lens, through our own thinking, through our own feelings. And really the goal is to try to recognize that, but more importantly, tune into exactly what they're trying to say and reflect back to them what you hear so that they can correct you or I if we're not hearing them correctly. I think that the other thing I would say too is that there's a lot of research that supports that criticism, sort of a critical language, critical statements can be incredibly destructive to specifically people in relationship. And so I think that trying to stop that as much as possible. I think that trying to tune into many people do things like they're exercising, they're doing yoga, they're doing mindfulness, they're taking hikes, whatever it is. They're doing things that are self-care oriented. And I do think that as part of that process, it helps us to regulate ourselves emotionally. And I think that recognizing that in conflict, when we are in a heightened state of emotion, it's going to be really hard to do that. So walk away, and before you do that, talk with your partner about how to handle when you get kicked up in that negative cycle. I think that as part of that active listening and reflection, reflect on what the person's saying, how they feel, like trying to develop your empathy for the other person. And also letting them know how you're feeling, letting them know what you can relate to in their experience emotionally. That supports sort of trying to sort of get through the challenge around communication. Finances, as I said, So when I think about this, I work with couples who are just starting their relationships, premarital couples. I work with couples basically who have been married or together for multiple decades, have kids, don't have kids. There can be a lot of different sort of places in the life course when people come to see someone like me. And so what I will say that when I notice money is a hot button issue, it can be a trigger to conflict. I think that it can be related to differences in spending habits, in financial stress, loss of jobs, and also different goals or really not having goals. And what I would say is money is one of those topics that I think most people and most of us in relationships are not talking about at all. Or if we are, we're not really talking about it sort of consistently. And I think that one of the things that's interesting is if you look at the research around this, couples who keep financial secrets from one another, that's correlated. It's related to when relational satisfaction. So it's more likely that a person who might be keeping secrets around money from their partner is going to also endorse not really feeling good in the relationship, as good as they could. And so when you think about how do you address some of the challenges around sort of finances, talking about it, getting a sense of how it is that your partner spends money, how does money stress them out? I think there's certainly a lot of resources, sort of online, book resources, as well as experts who basically can assist us with, getting financially educating ourselves. And I also think that it's one of those conversations where it's ongoing and you have to be transparent, and just recognize that it is a hot topic kind of issue. Specifically, another issue that I think many couples face is balancing time and priorities. I think that the most common example is generally any couple or any people in relationship I'm working with who have children. Generally, it's your couple needs get squeezed out. It's all about the family, and that generally is from birth until at least 18, 20 years old. What I also go to now is that most of us are working pretty extensively. People are carrying multiple jobs to make ends meet. In that context, there is very little time for self-care, for individual, interest activities, let alone couple activities. And another thing that I get into here, because it gets into sort of this idea of how to sort of work with this challenge, is I think many times people struggle with we're all on our phones. We're all sort of plugged into what's going on online. I think that alternatively, everything that's coming in at us is like a fire hose. And I think it creates a context where we sort of frequently are not quite as tuned into ourselves as we perhaps could be, as mindful of ourselves. And I think oftentimes we're not paying attention. And I think that frequently I'm working with couples where I'll notice one partner may be struggling with attention deficit, maybe struggling with being able to be present due to anxiety. And that can impact sort of this idea of how to balance time and set priorities. And I think that, obviously sort of trying to sort of create a schedule, set some personal and professional boundaries if you're able to, so that you can manage your time differently. And in addition to that, trying to sort of dedicate time, ideally, I think weekly, but sometimes it's not possible, but monthly, but trying to really create some solid time to spend together as a couple. And I think that doesn't have to be date night. I think date night can be a lot of pressure. It can be, okay, we're going to watch sort of something streaming and no kids in the room. It's just us, sort of in the bedroom, something that you're doing together, and trying to be very present to that. I think that parenting and family dynamics are another issue that can present challenges for couples. I think that couples frequently vary in how to parent. This comes back from how are we parented. And I frequently think that we don't necessarily know that until we have kids. And then all of a sudden we're like, okay, sort of, I guess this is what I think, or this is how I remember being parented. And I think that this is an important thing to do here. It also speaks frequently to values. But I also think that what happens with sort of this is that it leads to more decreased time for the couple, quality time particularly, because there's so many competing needs. And I think that sort of drift that happens in the context of the couple relationship leads to decreased sex, decreased affection, decreased sort of intimacy, emotional intimacy, but also physical. And I think that one of the things I notice here is that frequently parenting comes along gender roles. And so I think that recognizing that sort of as you think about how do you sort of approach, sort of this challenge, I think it's trying to rethink who's doing what. I think that it's trying to really be supportive and affirming and strengths-based, recognizing what do you both, what does the other person do well? How do you have their back in parenting situations and in family situations? Because the other thing to think about here is that you can have families where sometimes couples are sandwiched. They're taking care of parents who are older and they're taking care of their kids. And so that even pulls on their time further. And so I think there, to me, I think that it's really important that you try to assess what does each person bring to the table as a parent, as a partner, how are you working together? And I also think that there's a lot of, and it goes back to Dr. Jeff's example with the Sacramento park today. It's like opportunities doesn't have to be that big. It can be something where like you're taking 5 minutes in your car before you go into work. You're listening to, a particular, the Calm app or something like that. Mindfulness-based stress reduction strategies for each partner in the context of their lives so that they can basically be sort of more present to themselves and hopefully their partner. I think that another thing that happens, as I said, couples relationships are not static. They change over time. And so to me, I think that we may, when we first get in relationship, talk to our partner about, okay, what do you want in your life? Sort of, but sometimes you or I are so caught up in that feeling of that sort of chemical reaction, that sense of love, that sense of lust for the other person, that basically we're not necessarily sort of thinking fully about sort of things like, what are our goals, what are our values, what are our priorities. I do think that what I will say is that, sort of, I do see young people today are more tuned into that. And I also think they're more likely to talk about it in the context of a dating situation. But I also think at the same time, it's an ongoing conversation. Where are you at? What are you happy with in your life? What would you like to change? And how are you having those conversations regularly so that you can continue to assess how in alignment you are as a couple? And I think that the more often you are having those conversations, the more likely you're getting used to difference. Difference isn't bad. It's just a matter of sort of recognizing what is important to each person and how do your shared goals sort of support what you're each hoping to accomplish in your life. I also think sometimes things can happen that we can't anticipate. That's the contextual consideration here. A major life event. When I think about this, to me, I think about like the loss of a parent. For some people, when they lose a parent, I mean, obviously for all people, that's emotionally devastating. But I also think at the same time, sometimes you can get a financial inheritance there. So that can be totally, upend a person's life course. They may inherit enough where they decide, I don't want to work anymore. So how does that change the relationship? And how is it that leads the couple to potentially be misaligned? That's an example of, sort of why the ongoing conversations need to occur. And I think that, as I said, you want to normalize these conversations and the fact that changes occur. Kids grow up, they move out, people retire, people move. There's all these changes that we navigate, and being able to be flexible and compromise and to recognize what is something that you're clear on that maybe is something that is a fundamental value. A good example was within some couples, monogamy is a fundamental value, but not for all couples. Versus what are places where you might be able to compromise and find that middle ground. And I think that as you have these conversations, going back to that active listening, to that communication skills, it's like, how are you reflecting back what it is the person is saying to you? How are you letting them know how you feel, recognizing how they feel, affirming them in sharing, and going into conversation with you and sharing what they're thinking and feeling, and really sort of, again, cultivating that sort of reflection, that positive communication pattern. I think that trust and jealousy are ubiquitous. They're all over the place in relationships. And I think that there can be a number of reasons for that. I think frequently people come into relationships with past experiences of infidelity. I think that that is frequently trauma. And I think that ultimately can be unresolved. And I think in the context of a relationship, there can be a lot of personal insecurities, anxiety, as well as there can be infidelity in the context of the current relationship. And I think that the context of social media and social relationships oftentimes can really exacerbate it, because they on one level, it's sort of open dialogue out there, and on another level, it still seductively reinforces certain messages around what is a good relationship and what isn't one. And so it creates a context where there can be just a pretty significant challenge in this area. Now, what I would say here is I think that ultimately recognizing that trust breaches and that trust takes time to both build and repair. And I think that it's about consistent communication, consistent behavior. And I also think it's about emotional regulation. Sort of, if a person in a relationship breached trust in some way with their partner, I think number one, that's a difficult conversation to have. I think that frequently it's a good conversation if you feel like you can't have it together. Find a third party, find a therapist to talk with you about it. But at a base level, what I also go to is that it's about sort of, being able to have a space that is safe to talk about what occurred, and for the individual who breached trust to be able to have the emotional regulation to not get angry, not avoid, not get upset, and tune in to what the other person is trying to say and receive it without defending themselves. That's tall order outside of therapy, but people do it. I also think that in addition to that, recognizing that there can be triggers, there can be things that specifically phones, social media, anything involving ex-partners, ex-spouses, sort of anything involving third parties, that can be potentially a trigger, notably if there's been a breach of trust. Another area clearly that is a challenge is sex and intimacy. I think that specifically here it gets into the drift that occurs for couples with managing their lives and managing potentially parents, family, work. And I think that in addition to that, you have issues such as health status or aging. Over time, research supports that type of the sexual desire that you and I had at the beginning of our relationship declines over time. That doesn't mean that it goes away. And I think that affection, can also drift because of competing priorities. I think that you should approach, sort of when you think about the strategies, there are a number of different professional strategies when you're thinking about, how you can work on your sex life or work on physical intimacy. I will say that what I talk with clients about is looking at it like the gym. It's something that you have to work at. And in addition to that, talking with them about the differences between reactive desire and spontaneous desire. I might not feel horny, not feel spontaneously turned on, but in response to sexual initiation or affection, I might feel reactively turned on. And that counts. I would also say, too, there's a lot of research-informed approaches to working with couples around sort of differences in sexual desire. I think that one of the things that sort of definitely be talking to your primary care medical doctors about, I know it's probably not an easy conversation to bring up, but they are trained to be able to have these conversations, is basically, are there physical health issues? Are you on medications? Do you have any underlying medical conditions that are leading you to feel less turned on, less interested in sex. And there are treatments out there to sort of to potentially help you. The other thing I would say too is, as I referenced earlier, life transitions, I think that one of the things that I think about here is that for many couples, when you have children, when that experience is life altering, and you spend the better part of 2 decades putting all of your heart and all of your soul into raising your kid or children, and then what happens is the couple drifts and drifts and drifts, and then all of a sudden the kids move out, 18, 20 years old, and then the couple's like, wow, where are we? And so I think that you want to recognize that earlier than when they're 18, 20 years old, how to continue to prioritize your relationship concurrent to your other things. I also think that there can be unanticipated changes like moving, jobs, as I said, parental loss. There's things that can occur that challenge couples. And I think that in those cases, I think that it goes back to how is it that you are prioritizing your time as a couple? How do you have stress management in both of you or all persons involved? Doing things that are mindful based, that are managing their stress. I think that in addition to that, there are ways in which even online you can find things that like couple enrichment kinds of YouTube videos, or you can also find podcasts, things that can help you as a couple work on your relationship beyond sort of just going to therapy and build that resilience that ultimately I think will assist you in making those transitions successfully. I guess I want to just thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to sort of present to you today, and my contact information is available if you ever want to reach out. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. There was so much great stuff packed in there, so I really appreciate it. I was thinking a little bit about, especially, like I know you too, when I'm working with the couples on this new way of communicating, especially like using reflection and really helping them learn how to be a better listener. Because what happens often is they're so busy creating their defense and thinking about their hurt and things, they're not feeling and tuning into their partner's hurt. And so they miss it basically. And the point of the reflection is to be able to do 2 things really, is to validate what you say really matters to me. What you say, it matters a lot. And so I'm reflecting back to you that I'm really listening and trying to get it. And I want to make sure that I have accurate information and I hear the message that you're trying to send me, right? But it feels kind of weird when couples first start with it, right? They're used to communicating a really particular way. And I'll tell them, I get it, but the way you're communicating is not working. That's why we're here. And this is a research-based way to communicate using this reflection, which feels a little weird. I heard you say, and I understand that you were upset with blah, 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 but it really does work quite well, don't you think?
I do, and I think that that's a great point. What I go to is usually when I think about, that idea of it's new, it feels strange, then it's about, okay, so tell me something that you've done in the past week or the past month that's been new for you. Like, I think that most of us can identify something that we've changed in our lives. Doesn't have to be significant, but specifically, we can recognize something or an experience where we've been open to change. And to your point, the weirdness is this is different. This doesn't completely compute. I don't know how I feel emotionally, but if they can hang in there and stay in that place, I think that they can sort of foster some of those skills that we're trying to sort of reinforce so that they feel that communication is more effective or more, they feel more heard.
Mm-hmm. I think too, what happens is oftentimes they're caught in their own turmoil and stuff. And it's like, I always tell them, when you feel this way, when you're frustrated and you're really upset, you desperately want your partner to understand where you're coming from. And if you try that desperately to understand where your partner's coming from when you're listening and trying to hear their trauma and they're upset with it, you can't lose. But the difficulty comes in we're caught in our own world and our own trauma and not necessarily listening to, this is a person I deeply love and want to understand, but I'm having trouble hearing them because I'm becoming defensive and thinking about all these things instead of listening and then reflecting back to them. Here's what I hear you saying to me. Did I get it right?
Well, it gets into being sort of kind to yourself and to your partner.
Mm-hmm.
It gets into realistic expectations. Maybe it's 5 minutes a day, as I said. Like, it gets into those mindfulness or those kinds of centering kinds of practices that are a boundary. If I take 5 minutes to myself before I go into work just to try to sort of listen to a calm, app, that's a boundary. It's saying that I'm important to me. And the more you do that in the moment, the more you're going to be able to regulate yourself in response to what your partner's saying to you.
Yeah. And another thing I really like that you talked a little bit about, and we did have Dr. Barry McCarthy on and talking about responsive versus reactive desire. And I think that's something to really, for people to understand that we are in these crazy busy worlds, and it's hard for us to change gears from, okay, I'm the partner who's been home with the kids all day, cleaning up, doing this, and then preparing the meal and doing whatever. And now suddenly I don't feel sexual. I don't even feel sexual. I didn't even brush my teeth today, right? It's like, so I think it's really important to remember that reactive sexual desire is equally valid. It's different, but it's also valid. Being emotionally engaged, getting yourself switched over to that place is sometimes necessary to keep sex and intimacy alive.
Yeah, and it gets into specifically the issue of, for example, parenting or household stuff. Like, the idea is that in a certain way, sort of the more flexibility I think that partners can have around that. I think that I'm thinking of the example of heterosexual couples who I'm working with. There's frequently gender roles that, but you could argue that they're there for any couple. But
I've seen it I've actually seen it in also my gay couples as well, male and male couples who one stays home. Even I have, so it's interesting. I have one couple who he's disabled, so he's the primary home person and she's out. Male, female, doesn't matter. He's like, it takes something for me to feel emotionally engaged because I'm so locked into my 24/7 parenting job.
And then what you get into, to me, is that on one level, there are some circumstances that define how it is that household responsibilities are made. In addition to that, I think that it's more about, no matter who the couple or who the relationship is, how are you thinking about why, who does what and why? Because the other thing I go to too is that sex to me is a way in which a lot of people define the quality of their relationship. And that doesn't mean that specifically it's not valid. That's true. But I also think that when sexual desire it has lessened, and when the priorities, when people are feeling really sort of stretched, I think that sometimes partners don't realize the importance of that sexual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be be challenging, particularly challenging to the long-term duration of the relationship.
Yeah, but needing that deep connectivity too. Sometimes just like, even though we don't always make time for it, we desperately need that deep connectivity, that person that really gets us to feel heart, soul, and body through sex and intimacy too. So that's great. I think I have 2 questions that came in. Let me start with the first one. All right. So for couples feeling disconnected, it's like sometimes they're like, where do we start? It feels like we live in these tangential worlds. I'm in mine, they're in theirs. We do a lot of parallel play, but we don't interact. So what's the first step to rebuilding intimacy?
I think that specifically, if a couple is disconnected, it's about connecting. I think that I think that what I would go to, which I talked about, is how is it that there may be time in your schedule where you are specifically um, spending time together. What's interesting is I think about the context of some of the clients who I've seen or am seeing, like sometimes that could be really challenging, not
Mm,
just for, not just with having children, for example, but also one person may be traveling for their work, long distance relationships. There's lots of context that idea of disconnection can be really prevalent. I think that it's about being disciplined about creating time for the other person, for the relationship. And I think it's also about recognizing and validating when the other person is doing that, no matter how small, those acts of service, that kindness, that
yes.
respect. I
Yeah.
think the connection has to occur before I'm going to assume the intimacy is the sex or affection. You've got to feel connected first before that can occur.
I think that's definitely true. And, you set your intentions. A lot of us, you said mindfulness and really trying to set your intentions. But I think two really overriding valuable things. There's so many great things with what you said, but is one, that self-care and relationship care. And to me, I think, wow, what better things in your life could you invest in than yourself and your loving relationship? Those should be at the top of your list.
Absolutely, because I think that ultimately they are what sustain us. They are,
Yes.
when you think about what's going on outside of sort of our individual lives, there's a lot of things that can be that can bring us down. And I think that ultimately it requires a level of self-care and care of relationship that can be a bit of a safe space for us in the context of navigating life.
Yes, they breathe new life into us. True. Our other question that came through, can you expand on ideas? This couple was talking a little bit about that they do something called pillow talk, and that's something they found helpful. But what are your top most helpful daily habits? Do you have a top favorite daily habit or ritual that you could think can help couples?
I think that many couples are already doing is just how you're doing it.
Mm.
For example, how many people in relationship text their partner and might be saying, how are you doing today? Or have you had a, sort of have a great day, XO. There's way we're already sort of trying to be is sort of via text affectionate with our partners. I do think it's about turning up the volume a little bit. How is it that you are, being a little sexier? How is it that you are potentially revealing a little bit? Like I'm thinking about sort of, sort of getting into a little bit of sexting with them a little bit in the context of the day to day. There's ways in which we are trying to ultimately connect with our partners already, and it's about recognizing those and trying to amp them up a little bit.
Yeah, so it's those small things and doing those small things with great love and mindfulness, what we put into each of those things. Yeah, I think that's really valuable. I think that's awesome. And I just think it's great. Thank you so much for so many good ideas. I think a lot of people have gained a lot from it. And I really, really am so happy you were able to join us and share your expertise. You have a lot of experience with couples and as a sex therapist, so it's great information. We're going to do a little centering exercise to bring people back to where they were because it's been a lot of information. So I want to talk them through that a little bit. So we're going to take a moment. I want you to settle into a comfortable position, or I want you to comfortably embrace your partner. If you'd like either of those things, get in a comfortable position. If you are able and comfortable, gently close your eyes. Let's become present with ourselves. Now take slow, deep breaths in, counting to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale for 4 counts fully. 1, 2, 3, 4. Continue that pattern of inhaling for 4 and exhaling for 4. And as you exhale and relax, release any tension. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw soften. Let go of any tightness you feel wherever you feel it in your body that no longer serves you. Now I want you to bring to mind someone that you love, maybe a partner, a close friend, or even yourself. Imagine sending them warmth, kindness, and gratitude. Feel that love radiating from your heart, filling you up. Let love take over. As you take another breath in and slowly exhale, remind yourself, I come from love. Love is my source. I am love. I bring love into everything that I do. When you're ready, gently open your eyes and carry this intention forward with you as you move forward. A lot of great information today. I'm so pleased you joined us. Vic, can you tell us what's up next week with our next episode of Dr. Jeff Talks About Sex and Intimacy?
Society often equates sex with intercourse, but true intimacy goes far beyond penetration. In this thought-provoking episode, Dr. Jeff is joined by renowned sexual health expert Dr. Susan Kellogg-Spade to challenge traditional views on sex. Together, they explore the possibilities and pleasures of non-penetrative sexual experiences. They offer insights and practical tips for effective ways of pleasuring each other, deepening connection and satisfaction in your intimate life. Join us March 25th to learn more.
So I really appreciate everybody being here. Just like if you're looking for Armstrong's Wood, it's actually in Guerneville in the Russian River. And in a place like that, it's easy to remember how miraculous you are as a being, how miraculous the world around you is, and how incredibly interconnected each and every one of us are. Dr. Jordal, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your expertise. It was awesome. I really appreciate you sharing with our audience, and I thank you, audience members, for being here as well. Anything else from you, Dr. Jordal, before we...
Thank you so much, and your audience. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. And thank you for being here. This is not possible without you, and I hope you learned something new today, and I hope you realize how amazing and miraculous and valuable you are, as well as your partner. Love more.